Hi, Jonathan York, Bay Financial Partners, looking at investment markets. Certainly in the US, the market's still sort of coming to terms with that really big number on CPI, and the debate still rages whether it is just going to be a temporary blip, and whether the sort of Fed, can look through that as the economy does sort of reopen, or whether it's something more sort of longer term. Because certainly, the U.S. economy, it is, sort of recovering pretty well. Although obviously jobs are still down, sort of well down on pre-COVID levels. Still about 8 million jobs need to be found to get back to pre-COVID levels. You've also got the ongoing turmoil in the crypto markets as well, and it now transpires that some people are trading that on leverage of sort of 50 or 100 times. But certainly, if you look at it going forward, the U.S. economy is sort of poised to grow pretty strongly this year. So really, as the economy does reopen, some of the GDP forecasts range anywhere between sort of 6 to 10%. Now, that's obviously a pretty major sort of growth going forward, and it's just going to be interesting to see see on that inflation number whether it does sort of prolong, or whether it is sort of more short term. Because certainly, if it is longer term, then the Fed may have to raise rates a little bit quicker than anticipated, and the markets really aren't positioned for that scenario. But obviously, the big sort of proviso on that is obviously COVID. Certainly, the vaccination program in the US is rolling out pretty well. It's just a question of getting on top of that and just keeping those vaccinations going. It also looks like President Biden will have his first meeting with President Putin as well in sort of mid-June, and that will be very interesting to see how that meeting goes. Especially after the latest condemnation of Belarus, with that plane being diverted so that an opposition journalist can now be arrested. Now, that's sort of seen widespread global condemnation of Belarus, except from Russia. Now, obviously, as sort of global demand does pick up with economies reopening, oil is still holding a pretty decent bid, sort of trading around that sort of $65 on WTI. But maybe upside is limited really, because certainly OPEC has plenty of spare capacity to be able to turn the taps on to meet sort of increased demand going forward. The UK is still pushing along at a pretty good rate, really cranking out the vaccinations now up to around sort of 55–60%. And certainly that economy, is sort of reopening and showing some reasonable signs. And it'll just be quite interesting now to see how the growth sort of pattern goes for the rest of the year. And certainly Europe as well seems to be getting a little bit more of a handle on the virus. That's certainly welcome news, because certainly the southern European countries, sort of Greece, Spain, Portugal, Italy, will really be looking for those borders to be reopened and tourists coming in, and obviously spending money to reinflate their economies and sort of push them through for the summer period. A little bit closer to home in Australia, and there's been a further sort of flare up in Melbourne, and the bubble now between New Zealand and Australia, certainly for Victoria, has been temporarily put on hold. Now, certainly with previous sort of flare-ups, Australia has been pretty good at managing to contain it. The issue here is that the infected person attended a major sporting event, and that's just going to be interesting now, obviously on the contact tracing, just to see how effective that is, and really just to see how transmissible the person was during that event. But certainly the Australian economy, again, looking in pretty reasonable shape. There is potentially a bit of talk out there about a possible commodity super cycle. Certainly if you look at iron ore up closer to sort of $200 a ton. That could have some major implications to the Australian economy, with sort of minerals and resources, really pushing on at a pretty good rate. Also as well, certainly the banks, for a long time now looking pretty reasonable shape, and sort of going forward, having ridden out, potentially the sort of worst case scenarios with COVID, now look to be pretty reasonable for the next sort of couple of years. In terms of their earnings and performance, and also as well dividend payouts as well. Here in New Zealand, obviously a little bit of a blip with that sort of temporary hold on the Trans-Tasman bubble to Victoria. But the New Zealand economy, again, sort of pushing on at a reasonable rate. It's just going to be interesting to see how it sort of goes through the winter period, because certainly the present, really reliant on that vaccine rollout, which now, looking at getting everyone vaccinated by the end of the year, does seem a little bit stretched. Given the fact that official figures show that only 130,000 people have had 2 vaccinations so far. So it will just be interesting because, supposedly the sort of public rollout will start sort of June, July. Now, if you look at it, 1st of June is next week. So it's just going to be interesting to see how that sort of vaccine rollout does start to take shape. Now, Infratel have a bond in the marketplace, 6 years. Interesting, the rate there looks like to be 360, 3.6 for a 6-year bond. That will probably attract some reasonable attention. So if you're interested in that, go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz. And maybe just a sign that interest rates are starting to nudge up as well, because certainly most of the bonds that have been issued over the last sort of 3 to 6 months certainly haven't had a 3 handle on them. A good time to be checking those KiwiSaver balances as well, to make sure you get that maximum government contribution. If you're unsure what they are, so you go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz. So if you are looking for income options, as I said, there's plenty of alternatives available. Certainly I think that Infratel bond will attract quite a bit of attention, quite a bit of support. But if you're interested in discussing what's available, say www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon.